संस्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। My thanks to Swami Shuddhidananda ji for his invitation to share some thoughts with you all, and my greetings to all the monastic brothers at the Advaita Ashrama and elsewhere, and very warm wishes to all those who are listening to or seeing this talk, who are the virtual audience. And we will be spending the next few minutes, maybe around 45 minutes to 50 minutes, in dwelling upon a subject that I feel will interest everyone. We shall spend some time on the subject of happiness, peace and fulfillment from the perspective of Vedanta as well as the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda. We are passing through a time when we all feel a need to understand. We all are driven to this point when we want to understand what is peace, or how we can attain peace, or what is happiness, and what is fulfillment in life. Human beings, after all, are in need of these. They are in search of that. In the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna says, Ashantasya kutas sukham. One who is not peaceful, how can he have happiness? So peace and happiness, they are interconnected. So today we are here and trying to spend some time, trying to focus on this subject, which is going to make us think about as to what are the deeper dimension of these ideas or these things that we are seeking in life. One thing that without any distinction is applicable to all, or is true in the case of everyone, is that man is seeking happiness. Whether he is young or old, whether he is ignorant or very learned, whether he is poor or very rich, whatever be his social status or condition, one thing that everyone seeking is happiness. This is one basic fact about all. As one of the writers says, if we were not seeking happiness, then we would be putting our hand in fire, which means we would be burning our hand and would be getting all the blisters and the pain that comes out of it. So we should be very clear that one basic universal urge that is in all of us, and that is to seek happiness through midst of all the things that we get, all the success that we attain, all the attainments and accomplishments we want to achieve in life. Through our every little experience in life, we are seeking happiness. But what is happiness is a question that keeps eluding us, because we know every experience that we have of happiness is followed by also an experience of unhappiness. Happiness and unhappiness, it's like a cycle that's on which our life is seemed to be working. We look for something, we search and we try to get it, and once we have attained it, even after attaining it, for some time we feel happy, no doubt, but very soon that happiness as if dries off. And again we are in search of something more than that. Say for instance, somebody perhaps wanted to become famous, and once he attains that state of fame, that situation where he is very well known, he wants to ensure that it continues to be so. It's not that he gets into oblivion. He has to maintain his state of being famous. So he has to struggle for that. He has to work for that. So there is happiness, there is attainment, but there is also a kind of unfulfillment. That is the general experience of most of us, that happiness is followed by unhappiness, attainment is followed by struggle to keep up that attainment, and having attained something, again we feel we need to fulfill ourselves further. If it was not so, people who have attained something very extraordinary in life from our ordinary angle, they would have been men who would never face any unhappiness. But we know that they are also very unhappy. We sometimes hear of self-killing by such people, or we find them they are fearful, or they have attained a, they are trying to get something which will make them live or be existent all throughout. So there is a struggle, there is an urge to attain something, and we are saying this is what this is happiness which people are trying to attain. Along with happiness, one more thing that we are all seeking is that we are seeking improvement in life. We are not sufficient to attain something, we want to make it better. We want to have something more, and yet more, better. So this is called in Sanskrit Abhyudaya. Abhyudaya means rising from one state to another state of accomplishment or progress. So we want to improve things. How long should we improve things, or how much should we improve things is a question. But we want all to have improvement, we want to have more and more betterness, or things which are better than earlier. So this is a journey that we are all following. This is all the thing that we are all looking for. In the Kathopanishad, the famed Kathopanishad, we find a wonderful verse which says that the mind is somehow always going out. This going out of the mind is called as Paranchikhani Vyatranata Swayambhuhu Tasmat Parang Pashyati Nantaratma Kaschidhiraha Pratyagatmanam Aikshata Avratta Chakshuhu Amritattva Vicchan. The Rishi says, the Rishi in the Kathopanishad says that most of us are looking for this happiness, this fulfillment, and this improvement outside. Paranchi Khani. Khani refers to the senses. Paranchi, they look outward. The senses, after all, our life consists of the senses and the use of that senses. So it is going out, it is in search of something. It is like a curse. He says Vyatranat. The word Vyatranat means it has been cursed, or it has been a kind of punishment is given to man. Why should it be punishment? Because what is available inside and so near, we are looking outside. It is like what Sri Ramakrishna says, that a man who was in habit of smoking gets up late at night and feels the need for smoking. But in those days when there was no lighter, he found that he had no matchbox either. So there was a small fire burning. He takes up a small lantern and goes to his neighbor's place and says, "Can you give me?" He wakes him up late at night and says, "Can you give me a little fire to light my my cigarette," or whatever he wanted to smoke? The man said, "My goodness, you came all the way to seeking for this fire. It's right in your hand. There is a fire. Why don't you use it?" So we have something so close to us, similarly, but we are looking for it through the senses outside. So Paranchikhani Vyatranata, who has done this? Who has made our senses go outward, or our mind go outward, so that we are seeking for happiness or fulfillment outside in things of the world? He says Swayambhu, as if God has created this world in this way. God has created this world in this way only, that the mind goes out. It is not turning within. So what we saw, Parang Pashyati Na Antaratma. So we see only the external world, what our senses can perceive. What can our senses perceive? See, the great Indian rishis, were people who greatly believed in generalizations. They say, when I say, what do we see outside? They won't say, we see buildings, we see roads, we see, let's say, this camera, we see other people, we see objects, whichever, whatever falls before our vision of the eye. They won't say that. They say everything that we see outside is form, is a rupa. So the Vishaya or the object of our eyes is rupa, a form, a particular shape. So that shape we can give any name. It could be a mountain, it could be a river or anything. So similarly, all senses, their objects of perception have been generalized. So the sound is that what our ears receive. It's not that sound of this talk or the sound of a song or the sound of a river or a passing train or the noise of children playing in the street. It's not that particularization, but generalization. It's a sound. Similarly, our other senses, they're all generalized, like smell or touch or taste. These 5 basic senses through which we are perceiving the world. I would also draw your attention. Look at most of our things in whatever we have, our scientific progress or technological advancement or R&D that we do and come up with new objects and new devices. If you see them very patiently, you will find actually they are all extension of our senses only. So for instance, a camera is an extension of our ears and eyes, both put together. Or look at a CCTV. I cannot see things through my eyes, which have a limited vision, but through CCTV I can observe the entire building. So that means my own eyes have been extended in the form of these devices. Similarly, I could extend my other senses, or let's say telescope, or let's say a microscope. These are all extension of our senses. So whatever, our senses are looking for the sense of inner peace or happiness through these. So but when we go out, we are in search of some thing outside, so we develop at the level of science. Scientific discoveries are made by proper observation, by proper conclusions through those observations. We go deeper and we discover, no, what we were at the surface we were seeing, there is something more. We just see a drop of water, but when we take it to the microscope, our enhanced senses, so to say, we discover, oh, water consists of, if this water contains some bacteria perhaps, or if I go further, I say this is nothing but H2O, some chemical putting together. So my senses are in search of something, and I first analyze the external world. Parang pashyati. So I am in search of science, things, and that is called science. And science has developed. All our scientific things, all our modern day equipments, everything has been searching outside to how to make the world better, how to make our living better. It all has a place. In the scheme of the larger scheme of spirituality, it has a place. We never say science has no place in spiritual life, but this is the space we are living. Say for instance, I am able to speak to you, I am sitting away in Kanpur, and here I am recording a talk which is put up in YouTube, and it reaches all those who are listening to it. So this is a discovery that we have made by our senses going out into the objects and forces of nature. What we call as YouTube or what we call as any of the scientific thing is not this outcome of research of one man. There are so many people, layers after layers of these researches have taken place. Say somebody has worked upon camera, and somebody has worked on a video camera, and somebody has further worked on how to telecast what has been recorded, and somebody has now worked on the digital world. Things have been progressing up and up. So we are searching for this outside, and there we have made improvement. There we have made changes in our life which suit us, which help us, which has made life much better. which has made life much more secure at one level. But we also know, despite our scientific progress, which is commendable that we have made this, we are also having almost side by side a state of peacelessness. Look at what has happened today with all these scientific cameras. Look at how much of insecurity, how much of crime is there around. That's why people have to install all kinds of gadgets at the beginning of, at the entrance of their, let's say, an apartment, to see whether who has come, whether the camera it is visible, who is there, we have to see it inside. All this sense of insecurity, sense of threat perception, why, from where is this is coming? So that is what takes us to another dimension of life. And that another dimension of life is what the Kathopanishad says, or the Rishi says, is Kaschid Dhiraha Pratyagatmanaikshat. Behind the what is being observed, there is an observer. Behind what is being seen is the seer. Behind what is being perceived is the perceiver. So we are all perceiving, we are observing, we are experiencing. Who are we? We are experiencing the scientific benefits, but who are we? So the hard question of life, as it is said, is the question of self. Who am I? From where is this sense of I coming, sense of energy coming, which is making me perceive things in the world? Who is it that is, who is the observer, experiencer, and who is seeking something? Who is he? This is what the Kathopanishad says, Pratyagatmanaikshat. One who is interested in, Aikshat. One who is wanting his desires of Pratyagatman, his own divine being, Avratta Chakshuhu. He, as if, closes down his senses. Avratta Chakshu actually means a person who has closed his eyes. So the first step we seem to say when a person is trying to meditate or trying to be spiritual is he closes his eyes. We look at the picture of Buddha, look at the life of Swami Vivekananda, and you will find his pictures, or Sri Ramakrishna meditating. So we say they have all closed their eyes. So they are looking inside. Once we close the eyes, we see only darkness. That's good to begin with, that we see darkness, we see there is nothing except that there are a number of thoughts firing from different sides, memories, ideas, expressions, feelings which are coming through our at the surface of our mind, but we have closed our eyes. So that's the first step. We begin like that, and then we begin to question ourselves. We begin to as our mind begins to calm down, we begin to see things clearly. As the mind becomes not only calmed down, it also becomes purer. Then we begin to see the deeper truth about ourselves. Pratyagatmanaikshat. Then we begin to see our true self within, Amritatvamichan, and we become the seekers after the immortality. We are dwelling upon the subject of how we can seek lasting happiness, lasting peace, and lasting fulfillment in life. The word lasting is very important, because we all experience peace, happiness, and fulfillment in life, but they are not lasting. For instance, the happiness of a sensory experience, let's say eating. Let's say we enjoy a particular sweet. We enjoy it. We, first of all, we create a sense of restlessness to attain or to get that. I feel a desire to eat a rasagulla. You know, the Indian sweet, the rasagulla. So I become restless. First I develop a desire, then I deeply think over it, and becomes a very intense desire. Then I can't any longer hold it, and I somehow go and get a piece of it and I swallow it. It gives me happiness. but that happiness lasts only within certain circumstances. What are they? First of all, I must have the Rasagulla or that sweet or that sensory experience in limited number. I can't have it unlimited. I might like it, but I can't take it even if I have a great capacity to eat. Some people have a lot of capacity of eating. I can't eat it beyond a limit. And nor can I go on eating and eating. I have to give a stop to it. Secondly, there should be an occasion for it. I can't be celebrating my loss of job by taking Rasgulla. I can't be taking something which is a very favorite of mine at a point when I have suffered a defeat. So I can take it only within certain circumstances, within certain limits. All right, within certain limits, certain circumstances, even if I take this repeated experience of having the sensory experience, sensory fulfillment, we all know is after some time it is boring. We want something fresh, something still more exciting, something more sensational. So first of all, we are seeking this happiness in this way. And this we know is not lasting. And similarly, peace. Peace also, we all, we have our idea, I will have peace of mind. What's that? Somebody wanted to pass an examination. Sometimes we come across students who are working very hard to get into a competitive exam and finally, get the exam. They become successful. Not only become successful, they also should have a particular percentage. So once they attain that percentage and that success, they say, I have got peace now. But that peace and accompanied by that happiness is again short-lived. Something else comes in, and again you have to face the everyday situations of life. You celebrated your success and that gave you some peace, but that again is short-lived. So all sensory experiences are like that. Or somebody has a tax to file, tax return, some GST has to file. Last date is coming, so he rushes to finish it. He does it, and then he says, now I've got a peace of mind. I'm experiencing peace of mind now. So we have certain experiences throughout which are, they give us peace and happiness and fulfillment, but they're not lasting. This is a problem. This is the issue before us. This is a challenge before us. How to have lasting peace and lasting happiness and lasting fulfillment. This was the question which the rishis in the Upanishads took up. And this again is the question which has been solved for us, at least through his remarkable life by Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda and Ma Sarada Devi. They were people who had attained such state where there is tremendous peace. Peace which what in the Christian mystic terminology would be said as peace that passeth understanding, which means peace which is beyond understanding, that what has he attained that he is peaceful about. Because our peace is related to getting something, attaining something and then feeling peaceful. But no, what has he attained? So this is the peace that passeth understanding. Similarly, happiness. Our happiness is connected with the fulfillment of our sensory needs. But he is not getting that happiness because he has fulfilled some sensory need. Look at Sri Ramakrishna, look at his face, look at the picture that there's so much of joy and happiness. There's one particular picture of Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna, some 3 or 4 pictures were taken. And one picture you see him holding his hand in front like that, and look at his face. In fact, it's a face of such joy. What has he attained? What is that inner something which he has attained? Because it's definitely not something outside. It's not that he has gone to Singapore and is feeling happy about it. It's not that he has acquired a costly car that is making happy, or he's got a very upcoming something, let's an object or a flat or something which makes ordinary people like us happy. What is it making Sri Ramakrishna very happy? Or people of his type very happy. People whom in our terminology we will call them as rishis or saints or spiritually illumined souls. What makes them happy? What is the joy? I remember years ago, more than 35 years ago, Swami Buddhanandaji, once, who was the secretary of the Ramakrishna Mission, New Delhi, once he gave a talk on the joy of illumination. In his introduction, he said, we are always talking about there are difficulties and challenges in life. We know the struggles. We are speaking of the pain and misery which comes in our life due to various circumstances and reasons. Why can't we speak of the joy that is in illumination? Why can't we seek and think about the joy which a sage experiences because he has got illumination? What is that illumination? So this is the thing which this verse speaks of, that Pratyagatmanaikshata avratta chakshu amritattvam icchan. He becomes amritattva icchan. He is seeker after the amritattva or eternal, either you may call it immortality or eternal sense of joy, because the word amrita means that. The word amrita means both. It means eternity as well as it means joy. In our day-to-day life, one experience that comes to all of us is dealing with other human beings. When we are dealing with other human beings, we are interacting with them. That also causes us state of happiness or state of unhappiness, state of peace or state of peacelessness, or fulfillment or unfulfillment. Some people we come across, by being with them is a joy. As one of our monks possibly used to say, some people bring happiness wherever they go, and some people bring happiness whenever they go. So whenever they go, they bring happiness because they were cause of lot of unhappiness. That's why their going is bringing us unhappiness. So in our day-to-day life also we have these interactions. We have the experience of peace and happiness and fulfillment, which we need to dwell upon. According to the Upanishads, in all human beings there are different elements which are present. So the human beings have been studied and are being studied and will be studied further by human beings themselves. So we have the modern psychology which is studying human beings. We had the previous psychology which was studying human beings, in future also. So our rishis also have studied the human beings. And when they have studied, they have arrived at certain conclusions. So let us put it in a very broader way. We say in each human being, let's say there are three things which are present. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is spoken of as the three gunas. Three basic elements or qualities or constituent elements which make the nature or the whole creation are present. What are they? First is sattva, second is rajas, third is tamas. And based on these three gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas. Sattva stands for serenity, rajas for activity, and tamas for inertia. Based on these three, we also speak of three types of living beings. Like the sattva, those who are based in sattva, pure sattva, they are the devatas. And those who are full of tamas, they are the rakshasas. And those who are full of rajas, or where there is a mixture of these two, they are rajasikas or human beings. So human beings are rajasikas, devatas or the gods are sattvikas, and rakshasas are tamasikas. This is a general understanding. But then if you go further, we will find all the three existing in each one of us in different proportions. We have the human being in us, we all are humans, And we also have the Devata-like quality in many of us. In fact, it is there in all of us, but in some it is more manifest than others. Similarly, there is the Rakshasa or the demon-like quality which is present in us. In fact, in one of his lectures given in after he returned from the West, during his lectures when he gave from Colombo to Almora, Swami Vivekananda spoke of, he said 99% of us are still like at the brutish stage. We still have not become, we have not grown. We are still uncivilized, Swamiji makes a statement. So we have the animal in us, the man in us, or the God in us. Having said this, now let us turn to a story which is given in the one of the Upanishads, mostly in the Chandogya Upanishad. It says once men, gods and demon, they went to their creator, the Prajapati, and they asked for their father's advice as to how to live their lives. When then they approached he would not have, he was like the father was like a typical examiner. He would not give away things so easily. He said, if you want to know the truth about life, how to live life, you first practice life of self-control and discipline for 30 years. So it was a long period, but they did. The story goes, the Devatas, the Manushyas and the Danavas or Asuras, they went and spent 30 years in perfect self-control, as far as they could manage. And after that self-control and trying to live pure life of austerity, they come back to their father or their teacher. The father, who is none but God himself, he gives all the three of them one little word. And that word in Sanskrit is the. Not the English the, but the Sanskrit the. And keeps quiet. And each one of them has a message through that word the. The word the for the let's begin with the Tamasic or the Asuras. The Asuras, they take it to mean Dayadhvam, which means the refers to Daya. Because by nature, the demons or demon-like beings, they are full of mercilessness. They are cruel. They are violent. They can go to any extent to enjoy things. Their main purpose in life is to enjoy. And in that enjoyment, if anything which comes in their way, which is not up to their, which is coming as an obstacle, as a hurdle to them, they have no mercy. They just tear it apart. So for them, the advice given by Prajapati is, learn to have daya. Daya is compassion. Living a compassionate life. Try to cultivate daya, then you will be happy. Further, after this, you see, what was the purpose of having these 30 years of a life of control and austerity? That was to prepare the mind so that they could receive the teaching and have a meaningful interpretation from that. Then they come to, then the Manushyas go, or before that, let's say first the Devatas go, and for them the word the refers Damya, which means Damanam or control. The Devatas are the Sattva embodiments which are full of capacity to enjoy things. The idea of Devata is that he is in a state where there is no dukkha. So he just wants, he is in a state of enjoyment. And sometimes, as the stories go, in their efforts to enjoy, they do wrong things. So he say, in order to enjoy your life properly, you must learn to have control, damya. The word damya means self-control. For the asuras, it is daya or compassion, and for the devatat it is the self-control. Then comes the Manushyas. Manushyas who are who are mixture of both sattva and rajas, sattva and tamas. So they, when they approach devatas, when they approach the Prajapati, Prajapati tells them, you should learn to have datta, which means danam. The main problem with human beings is greediness. And this greediness is the cause of man's downfall. So the advice of Prajapati is that you must learn to give, you must learn to be charitable, you must learn to give danam. Now, Acharya Shankara, in his comments on this story which comes in the Upanishad, he says these three tendencies are present in all of us. So we should try to practice these three in our life. We should have daya, we should have damanam, and we should have danam. So all of us, this is a message given to us by the Upanishad. If we are in search of a meaningful life, and all of us are in search of meaningful life in some way or the other, it says try to practice daya, compassion, compassion to other human beings. Compassion comes in so many ways. Compassion is not just when somebody is in trouble that you have sense of compassion. Of course you should have that, but it is something more. Being kind to others, being refined to others, being aware of whether you are causing any inconvenience to somebody. That also is part of compassion. Compassion is a beautiful book written by one of the French person who has French or Italian. He says Paira Firuki. He speaks of the power of compassion. So the power of compassion is tremendous. The power of gentleness. It comes in so many ways. Then the damya, which means you turn to be self-control. One of the reasons is because for which we suffer is because we take up something and that we are not able to give up. And we do not know where to draw a line, how much we should go in for and how much we should not go in for. So the Bhagavad Gita says, if you want to benefit from the practice of yoga or the pathway of yoga, you must practice moderation. Yuktahara viharasya, which means there should be self-control. And third is danam. We must learn to give, we must learn to offer whatever we don't require or whatever we can afford to give to others. This danam need not be always in terms of giving money. Let us be very clear about it. It's not an appeal for funds that you should give danam. Yes, even that's also very important, that a person should support all right causes, but even something more than that. Danam is, in the Bhagavad Gita we find danam is spoken of as of three types. The danam which is given in the sattvic way, or the rajasic way, or the tamasic way. In the sattvic way, when the danam is given, it is given to the right person at the right time in the right quantity. Deshe kale patrecha, the Gita uses the word. Given the right occasion. You should not be giving danam to somebody who is going to misuse it. So it's very clear that you must choose the right person, the right cause and right place and right situation and give your whatever you can. And then there is a rajasic danam, which is not because of these considerations. They are the considerations mainly to seek applause from the society, to say that you have been very great, generous people, you are giving things to other. Even that's also acceptable, at least for the sake of these tendencies. At least a person will be doing some kind of charity. And the third is when a person does not have any of these consideration, and he may give it to the wrong person and in a wrong situation, and that is known as the tamasic danam. So whether it is the animal in us, which is the demon, or the god in us, which means the Devata in us, or the human or the man in us, we all have to follow, we all have to see that these three are met or they are trained by following Daya, Damanam and Danam, these three principles. We spoke about peace. How do we have peace? When we are speaking about peace, I said there is one peace which comes to us because some work is done. Something which was pending that is done. Certain circumstance has come to us, which is bringing a sense of peace, a peaceful place to live in, and a peaceful situation, and a peacefulness because I am free from certain troubles. Vedanta or Upanishads tell us that this concept of peace is a primary concept. We have to go deeper about seeking peace. The peace is to be found in the peace of mind, and that peace of mind and that peacefulness of the mind comes only when a person has learned to overcome his desires. Now this idea or issue of desires is something very huge. We have to spend some time as to understand what is the meaning of this. But to be in very short, what it means is this. We have certain desires, and desire is basic to life. Without desire there is no life. Without desire, body cannot be sustained. Sri Ramakrishna says that if a person becomes absolutely desired in samadhi, as we find in his teachings, if he attains the state of nirvikalpa samadhi, there is absolutely no desire left, then his body will disintegrate. Which means it's the desire which is keeping it integrated, which is holding it together. So basically we all are alive because there is desire. Holy Mother Sri Sharda Devi also speaks of it, that because there is some desire, that is why we have life. If desire is completely taken off, then we are no longer alive, because it is a desire which gives rise to birth and all the experiences that happen during our lifetime. But then when the scriptures are telling us to get away from desires or overcome desire, what do they mean? To begin with, what they mean to say is that the desires, we must make a distinction between what is our needs and greed. Make a distinction. This is my need, and beyond that what I am seeking is greed. While need must be looked into and it will be fulfilled, the greeds are infinite, and they will never be fulfilled to the point that yes, nothing more, because greed is ever regenerating itself. It is like the legendary demon which is spoken of in the Durga Saptashati, that is Rakta Bija. So Rakta Bija is one of the demons. If any of the drop from his body falls on the ground, it immediately takes the shape of another Rakta Bija. So if there is a fight going on, and if he is shot, or rather in those days as the Chandi describes, with the sword he is hit, a little drop, another Rakta Bija is there. Then the Divine Mother takes the form of another form, and as if now takes all that is falling out of his body as blood, she licks it out. Which is very symbolic of saying that there is a divine power present in all of us, which as if learns to understand and analyze all the desires that are rising in our mind, and finds out whether they are our need or whether they are a greed. If they are greed, they are simply thrown away. And if they are need, to what extent is our need, that is properly analyzed, and we try to put in our life. So overcoming desires is very basic to finding eternal peace or lasting happiness. We have to analyze what is the whole, why are we seeking desire? What is desire? In Sanskrit, it is another name for desire is Eshana, or wanting to go towards something. And what is Eshana? It's a kind of abhava. What is abhava? A lack. I lack something. That is why I desire something. I lack something, and that when I feel that lack, I am in search of fulfillment of that. So this simple principle of analyzing what is need and what is greed, and trying to fix to your ideas of what is your need, will be a great help in solving the problem of overcoming desires. Again, what is our need? We know certain basic needs are there, and then there are cultural needs, then there are intellectual needs, social needs. We have so many needs, a plethora of needs around us. So in short, I would say this much. Let's try to summarize this, that we must seek that inner joy, inner peace, from which all that we think outwardly is going to fulfill us, or outwardly we are feeling a sense of abhava, that gets fulfilled. And that is possible, the Upanishad says. We find in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad a beautiful statement. It says that a man will attain to eternal peace only if he discovers the self within. This idea of self within and discovering it is so very fundamental to the whole idea of spiritual living, that we must be able to discover that inner source. Once you discover that inner source, the mind calms down, and that is meant by eternal peace. The mind, when it is calmed down, it almost is a state of what we call as no mind. It's not the calming down in a temporary sense. It is a permanent calming down of the mind which is being spoken of here. Permanent means that state is he has purified his mind. He has no abhava feeling within him. There is no restlessness for things of the world or solving things of the world. He is in a state of complete inner, what the Bhagavad Gita calls sthita prajna, a state of steady wisdom. This is to be attained, the pathway to eternal peace, the pathway to eternal joy, or pathway to eternal meaningfulness in life is to be attained through the path what we call as the path of yoga. Swami Vivekananda has spoken of this as a path which we take through our different faculties. When we use it through our willpower and our capacity to work, when we take up this path, we call it as the Karma Yoga. When we take it through the path of analysis and path of reasoning with a purified mind, we call it Jnana Yoga. When we take up the path of pure love, bereft of all attachments and all lustfulness, it is the Bhakti Yoga. When we try to meditate, free the mind, when we use the power of concentration and focus within, there is a path of Raja Yoga or Dhyana Yoga. So these four paths which Swami Vivekananda has spoken of, they are the paths to this eternal peace, eternal happiness, and eternal fulfillment which we all discussing today. One thing which Swami Vivekananda laid before us, he said, yes, you can take up any of these paths and take it up and try to practice them. He said still better would be if you harmonize these four paths in your life, because we all need to work, so we have to learn to practice what is Karma Yoga. We all have the capacity of reasoning. Let us purify our reasoning, and there's the path of Jnana Yoga, and the path of Bhakti. Let us purify our emotions and direct it towards divine. That is a path of Bhakti, and the path of concentration or calming the mind. When we try to harmonize all these four in our life, Swami Vivekananda has put it beautifully. He says we attain to a state of complete self-manifestation. He calls it this way. He says each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divinity by controlling nature, internal or external. Do this either by work or worship or psychic control or philosophical inquiry, by one or two, and attain that freedom. Doctrines, dogmas, temples, rituals, they are all but secondary details. So this is what I would like to conclude with, that as we are seeking for eternal peace and fulfillment, as we began by this talk by referring to this verse from the Kathopanishad, let us turn within. That is, what the senses give us from that sensory experience, let us try to slowly train our senses not to go in search of their fulfillment too much, rather search for that fulfillment within. And this is to be sought by selfless work outside and by meditation inside, or by meditating and controlling the mind and putting it on our divine being again and again. And that is how we can all take up this path, and I'm sure all of you would give a patient reflection over what we have discussed in last few minutes, and read further Swami Vivekananda's and Sri Ramakrishna's teachings, which throw a lot of light on the idea of true happiness and true peace and fulfillment. I'm very glad that I could spend some time on this subject. My thanks again to Advaita Ashrama and all the monastic brothers there for giving this opportunity. Namaste.